Hey you guys, it's Crystal with the Abundantly Blessed Homestead. Today I'm going to talk to you about sourdough starter, so stick around. All right, so the first thing I'm going to say is I am by no means a sourdough expert at all. I've only had experience with sourdough starter for like a year, and that was just every so often I would use it, and only like in the last 30 days have I actually attempted to start making things with it. So I am not an expert. If you want a really cool channel to check out, the Bread Code here on YouTube is really awesome. They have a lot of interesting facts about how everything works. But I'm going to tell you where I am at in my journey with sourdough. So the first thing that I have learned is if you know anything about other ferments, is when they're happy, they get bubbly. Okay, so for instance, this jar right here of fermenting beans has bubbles at the top. Super happy, right? If you don't know how to ferment your own beans and take the musical fruit down a notch, so it's not so musical, I do have a video on that, and I will leave it in the link down below. But that's just one example of a ferment that gets bubbly. Okay, so when a ferment is bubbly, that means it's happy, which means this sourdough starter is happy. You can see bubbles in it there, okay? So that's a good thing. He's bubbly, okay? Another thing that sourdough is like other ferments is sourdough also, when your starter needs to be fed, a clear fluid will rise to the top, okay? And that will tell you that your sourdough starter is hungry and needs to be fed. And we will talk about the process of feeding it in just a minute. If you let it go too long, that clear fluid will turn kind of grayish, sometimes blackish in color, and it just means it's really, really hungry and that the sourdough starter needs to be fed. And all you do is you pour that gray liquid off and go ahead and feed it as normal. So I want to show you another ferment that has clear liquid in it, meaning it's hungry. So this is kefir, and right here is clear fluid called whey. So this ferment is done. It has run out of food options and is hungry. And so you would go through the process of harvesting your kefir and giving this ferment fresh milk, or the process would start over. So it's the same thing. And if you want to know about this, I'll put that link down below too. I have an entire video on how to make kefir. It's really easy, you guys, and it's a great way to put probiotics into your family's diet. Okay, so that's why sourdough is, a couple examples there of why sourdough is a lot like any other ferment. So basically, let's talk about what we're going to feed this little creature, okay? Sourdough starter is basically flour of your choice, filtered water, and the part that makes it alive, which is your good bacteria that are in here, okay? So, yeast and bacteria. So, basically, this little guy can eat a variety of flours. So, you could go to the store and buy flour. You could buy bread flour. You could buy white flour. You could buy whole wheat flour. Those are just options of stuff that you can buy inside the store. Or you could choose to grind your own flour at home by buying wheat berries or spelt or the whole grains of different types of grains and grinding them and feeding them to your sourdough, which is what I personally do. The difference between white flour and whole wheat flour is that the whole wheat has the entire grain and it's been ground and it has what is called germ still on it. Whereas the white flour has the germ removed, unless you're talking about white wheat, then of course that's an entire grain itself. I'm talking about the white flour that is sometimes bleached inside the store. That germ that's on the wheat berry is actually really important. That's kind of why God put it there. And when you start removing certain parts of food and processing it to make a new product, your body has a harder time utilizing that product. So just keep that in mind as you're selecting your flour for your sourdough. So let's talk about, let's see what else I was going to do. That's it, I think. So let's talk about the feeding process. So this guy actually needs to be fed, but he doesn't have the clear fluid on the top quite yet. He has already done what I call, personally, my own terminology here. He has already risen as high as he's going to and hit that peak and then fallen again, okay? So technically, I should see some clear fluid here pretty soon. So technically, he could be fed. I'm going to wait till I see the clear liquid because we just had sourdough today and I don't want to have sourdough again today. So I'm probably going to put him into the refrigerator. But basically, I'm going to walk you through how to feed him. So what you would do is you would take half of the volume of this starter out of the jar. Okay, so let's just say, like right now it's 3 cups. There's 3 cups in here. So I would take 1.5 cups out of what is already in this jar of the starter, okay? And then you're going to select the flour of your choice, and you are going to measure out 1.5 cups, and you're going to put it into here, and then you're going to add filtered water. Now, how much filtered water you add depends on what you're making. I typically try to go for about a 75% hydration. So, just to make math easy, if I was adding 1 cup of flour to my sourdough starter that remained, then I would be adding 3/4 cup approximately of water, filtered water, to it, and then you stir it. And basically, there's a whole bunch of different hydrations. There's some recipes that you want it more runny, like a 90% hydration. But for what I usually make, the thicker the sourdough starter, so it's a nice thick pancake, extra thick pancake consistency, like you would see if you were making a pancake batter, you want it super, super thick. Tends to work better for me personally. So, like I said, I tend to aim around the 75% hydration level. If you wanted to get really, really particular and you wanted to make sure you had exactly the same results or pretty darn close to the exact same results with your sourdough baking every single time, you should go ahead and buy a little kitchen scale, a little digital one that does grams. And if you were to weigh out, you could scrape out your sourdough out of this jar and you would put it on your scale and you would weigh it. And then you would know exactly how much of the dry flour to add because you want those two numbers to be the same. And then you would add your liquid. And once you have your amount of grams of dry flour that you're going to add to your starter, then you could figure out what 75% of that is, and you'd have it down to the exact gram of what your starter needs. And that's honestly how I started, was using a scale. And now that I've learned kind of how to feed my sourdough starter, I don't really use the scale any longer. But they are useful. And sometimes when I'm doing a recipe for the first time, I do get the scale back out. So anyway, and then let's just say this one's fed, okay? We're just going to pretend like I've added the flour and the filtered water and I've stirred it really, really well. So basically, how fast this starter rises depends on the temperature of your room. So if it's 70 degrees, if it's in a preheated oven where the oven gets turned off, just don't forget to turn off the oven because I've only done that once and it's not fun. You end up baking your sourdough starter. So usually what I do is I can preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and the second that I start preheating it, I start a timer for 2 minutes. And so it doesn't even really get to 350 degrees, but it warms it for 2 minutes, and then I shut the oven off, and then I just put this whole jar inside the oven. And then because it's so nice and warm, the little good guys in this mixture get really, really happy, and it will rise faster. So one really, really cool tip that I would like to share is, let's say I just mixed this up. What you should do is mark right here your height when you get done mixing, okay? Because what that's going to tell you is as this rises, it should double. And once it gets to the double mark or pretty darn close, I would start marking the jar again. This is how tall it got. This is how tall it got. Because then you'll learn how fast it took for your starter to get doubled in size. And when that starter gets doubled in size, that's when you want to use this starter in a recipe. So for my specific starter, it takes between 3 and 4 hours to double. So I would have to start my baking process 3 to 4 hours before I actually want to start my baking process. And so if you know how many hours it takes for your personal starter in your personal environment, then you can know when you could actually start your actual recipe making, because you will have a starter that is well fed and is ready to go. You can still use starter that's already collapsed in some recipes, but not all recipes. So most recipes want you to use a well-fed or recently fed starter. And that's what we're talking about when the original starter doubles in size and is at its, what I like to call a peak. That's the optimal time to use it. So that's all there is to that. Let's see. So it's the same situation. I have not personally mastered bread yet. I'm working my way up to bread, but it's the same situation with that. After you've added your starter and you've added all your other bread ingredients, and you're waiting for that to double in size, you're always waiting for that to double in size before you go to the next step. So you're doubling in size, and then you're moving it into pans, and you're waiting for that to double in size once again. And if you wait too long, the bread will collapse. But if you hit it just right, then you'll get a nice, fluffy, elevated, less dense type of loaf with more air in it. So just knowing your sourdough and knowing approximately how long it takes for that to happen is really, really crucial when it comes to baking with sourdough. So that was a lot, all in one video. So if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments down below. I'd love to answer your questions. Also, if you have not subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe. And that's all there is to it. This little guy can go into the refrigerator. If you only plan on using sourdough once a week, that's fine. He can just live in the refrigerator if you only want to have sourdough once a month. And you just keep on checking on him. And about once a week, he'll have that clear fluid on the top. And so he needs to be fed again inside the refrigerator. So you will, like I said, discard half, feed him the same amount. Volume-wise is what is left after you take half of it off. And then add your water to your preference of a hydration level. My personal preference is 75% hydration level. And that's all there is to it. I have gone so long where the liquid has turned black before, and I just pour it off and feed him, and he's back to life. So those are the crucial things that I did not understand when I first started doing sourdough starter. So I hope it helps you, and if it does, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.